Hey, Bear. All right, things have been absolutely crazy over here. I cranked out 3 videos last week, all of which had to do with the recent bear attacks in Yellowstone and Glacier National Parks. And guess what? That was just scratching the surface, because there was another fatal bear attack in Saskatchewan. There was a fatal bear attack in Japan. And just recently, there was a fatal bear attack in Bulgaria. That is a really fascinating conversation, because Europe is seeing an explosion of bears, specifically brown bears, except for Europe does not have the access to defensive tools like we have here in the United States and even in Canada. Growing grizzly bears, a populace that doesn't really understand how to share space with bears, and then pretty extreme limitations on what defensive options Europeans have in brown bear country. And on top of that, there are going to be more updates regarding the Yellowstone National Park attack and, of course, the fatal attack in Glacier National Park. But today is going to be a little bit different, because I think we could all use a little break and talk about something a little bit more uplifting. So I'm going to give you my top 6 e-bikes that I've reviewed in the last couple of years, including a sneak peek at a bike that I am currently in the process of reviewing. I'm going to include links to all of these bikes in the description below. So if you're interested, make sure to check those out and perhaps help the channel out just a little bit. So number 6, the Puckipuppy Labrador. Now, the Puckipuppy Labrador was a great bike. This is going to be an introductory e-bike for those of you who don't have a massive budget, while giving you that flavor of adventure, while also being able to naturally handle city streets, commuting, stuff like that. I had a great time on this bike. My family and friends loved it. We took it everywhere, went on a lot of fun trips with it. A couple of things that were lacking, and the reasons why it is currently at number 6, had to do with the cadence sensor. So the good news here is that Puckipuppy has since updated the Labrador, and you can now get it with a torque sensor. And I tell you, if you're going to do some rough off-road riding, go with the torque sensor. It's a much more intuitive way of interacting with the ground and the bike, and also allows you to get a nice workout in the process. The limitations of the cadence sensor aside, it wasn't the torquiest bike out there. It had plenty of power. You could definitely feel it on the hills, but there were definitely bikes that could handle hills better and had more torque. On top of that, the Puckipuppy, at least the model that I reviewed, the rear hub motor overheated on occasion. And it just had to cool off a little bit before you again could get the full benefit of that motor. But other than that, great bike. Didn't have any problems with it. The overheating was only a temporary thing. And, you know, just a solid bike all around. But just not the best in any of the categories that I really look for in a WILDSPACE's e-bike. Let's move on to number 5. This is the Lacrosse Thunder. Now, the Lacrosse Thunder, I wouldn't call it the prettiest bike, but this was an extremely capable bike. It was one of the better climbers at that price point, and I got 40 miles off of a single charge on some really mountainous terrain. We're not talking about just flat level ground or all downhill. This was up, this was down, this was on dirt roads, this was in forest, this was all over the place. I had a great time with this bike. Again, a great climber for the price point, lots of fun, but some of the accessories were just a little lower quality. Not poor quality, there's an important distinction here, but lower quality than some of the bikes coming up. Of course, a lot of those bikes were more expensive. The point is, this was an incredibly capable bike. I had a great time with it, quality climber. I didn't have any overheating issues with it, which is saying something, because I did miles and miles and miles of climbing on this bike. So an excellent bike. The reason why I included it as number 5 is that some of the bikes that are yet to come had some more premium components, better torque, better sensors, all that kind of stuff. I should also mention that the Lacrosse Thunder was also a cadence sensor e-bike. So again, not ideal for kind of that WILDSPACE's off-road, rough terrain riding. So that's the reason why it's also going to come in at number 5. Number 4, I really struggled knowing where I wanted to put this bike. This is the Hovsco GTRS Ultra. Now, this is a moped-style e-bike, unlike the rest of the bikes on this list. And for somebody like me who enjoys the outdoors, who enjoys kind of that more primitive terrain, the Hovsco GTRS, the suspension was fairly lacking. I mean, on roads it's going to be fine. And yeah, even a bit of off-road riding, it's not going to be a big deal. You can have a great ride on this. And in fact, I did. But those smaller wheels, the limited suspension, those made me tick it down a little bit. But there were at least 3 things that were really, really nice about the GTRS Ultra. The first being the dual batteries, which means that you can get some awesome range out of this bike. During my test phase, I put about 40 miles on this bike. Now this is on a single charge, and I only drained the battery down to about 50%, and that's after some serious climbing and some serious riding. Not only that, but for most of those miles, I was taking one of my kids on the back, some of which weigh close to 100 pounds. So this bike with 400 pounds of payload capacity, I was able to get some serious distance out of those dual batteries, which you've got to love. On top of that, as a dad, it is just beyond fun to put one of my kids on the back and then just take off on a bike ride. They loved it. I loved it. It was a perfect bonding experience. While maybe you're giving up some of those off-road kind of capabilities, there are some compensating virtues for this bike. Again, cadence sensor, which is fine. I mean, for a moped style e-bike or for a commuter e-bike, a cadence sensor is all you really need. For what it is and for the fun that I and my kids have had on this bike, I really, really enjoy the Hovsco GTRS Ultra. We still use it all the time, and that is why it's number 4. All right, so let's go to number 3. This is going to be the Puckipuppy Bulldog Pro. And it's important that we put the Pro on there because with the Pro, you got a bunch of upgraded features, including that torque sensor. And again, I can't say this enough. If you want the outdoor experience, the primitive riding experience, you've got to go with the torque sensor. Cadence sensors just don't get the job done. It's just too clunky on those off-road trails. You can make it work, you can have a great time, but there's no comparison. The Puckipuppy Bulldog Pro had a pretty good torque sensor, especially for the price point. But not only did this have a torque sensor, but it had dual 15 amp hour batteries, which allowed for some really awesome range out of this bike. On top of that, it comes with dual suspension front and back, very capable suspension, not the greatest in the world, but for 98% of people, it's going to be absolutely fine. A couple of other things, this was a rear hub motor e-bike, and believe me, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a quality rear hub motor. However, for a 750 watt rear hub motor, which is pretty standard for all of the bikes that I've shared with you so far, the Puckipuppy Bulldog Pro was a little on the sluggish side. And I do mean a little on the sluggish side. I mean a difference of maybe 2 to 3 miles per hour when traveling uphill. And the obvious reason for that is that the motor was the same size, but the bike itself was heavier because it had those dual batteries. That said, everything else on that bike was lovely. I really have no complaints, especially for the price point. For the ballpark price of less than $2,000, it was a very, very capable bike. And for those of you who have range anxiety, an excellent choice. So now we're on the champions podium, and we've got to talk about the runner-up. And that's going to be the Velowave Forest XM. Now, the Velowave Forest XM is not the cheapest bike on this list. In fact, I think it's probably the most expensive. That said, I had an absolutely wonderful time on this bike. And with one exception, which I'll get to in a second, I have absolutely no complaints. This bike was a climber. This thing could move uphill. Rather than the rear hub motor of all the previous entries, this had a mid-drive e-motor, and it was a pretty efficient one. I got some good range out of this bike. It climbed really well. It handled everything that I threw at it. It was significantly torquier than some of the other bikes, largely owing to that mid-drive e-motor. It was nimble, had quality suspension. I'm a bigger guy, so when I hopped on this bike, I found it bottoming out pretty frequently. Now that was obviously pretty easy to fix because the rear shock on the Velowave Forest XM is adjustable. So all I had to do is pump it up a little bit. That mid-drive e-motor hung a little low even after I adjusted the rear shock. And that's just the reality. If you got an extra couple of inches worth of lift from the tires, you're going to have an easier time going over obstacles on the trail. But not a big deal. Great bike. Probably the best climber on the list. This bike did awesome in all of my tests with that one quibble. A really high quality torque sensor for the price range. And you know what? Good times. Good times on the Velowave Forest XM. Now before I get to my number 1 pick, I'm going to give you a little peek of a bike that I'm currently reviewing because it's a close relative of my number 1 pick, but I'm still in the process of testing this bike, so I can't possibly rank it right now. And there are a few issues that I'll bring up in my full review video. So, without further ado, my number 1 pick, the Mokwheel Obsidian. The Mokwheel Obsidian has been my workhorse for a couple of years now. I have gone more miles on the Mokwheel Obsidian than any of my other bikes. probably about as many miles as half of the bikes on this list combined. It came with a rear hub motor, but that motor has served me really, really well. I have taken this bike on some ridiculous, rough, brutal trails and beat the living snot out of it, and it's still going. I think I've put about 400 miles on it to this point. I've done the paved roads, I've done the single tracks, I've done the four-wheel drive roads. I've done rocky bouldering with this thing. And this thing just keeps on going. Because I have beat the living snot out of this bike, I have had a couple of minor repairs. For example, the front brake rotor actually got ripped off of the rim after I did some particularly rough riding on that bike. The screws got stripped out and I had to replace the rim. And that is obviously a bummer, but you have to keep in mind what I've asked this bike to do. I'll show you a picture of it right now. This bike has been through hell. It just keeps on going. Another little foible that it has is one of the pedals, because I'm a bigger guy, and again, I've gone on some really, really rough stuff. One of the pedals got a little bent. And so when I pedal, it's a little wonky. Obviously, if you don't beat the bike up like I did, if you don't weigh as much as I do, more than 200 pounds, you're not going to have that big of an issue with it. But on top of that, this bike has a payload capacity of 400 pounds. The torque sensor is sweet. I think originally this bike sold for about $3,500, but right now, I think they're selling it for under $2,000. And I have no problem referring this bike to people. Now, there is one person who I guess has had a different experience, and they left a comment on my full review video. You can, of course, watch that. I'm not trying to hide anything. I can only speak about my experience. My experience has been great. I've sold a number of the other bikes on this list because I don't need 7 or 8 e-bikes in my garage, especially since I don't have a family that large. So there's just no point in me holding on to them. But the Mokwheel Obsidian, I've held on to that one because it's the one that just keeps on going. So if the Mokwheel Obsidian is my number one, then what is the bike that I'm currently reviewing? Well, that is the Mokwheel Onyx. And this is the upgraded version of the Obsidian. Now, I've put about 80 or 90 miles on this bike so far. I've taken it all over the place, and I'm still testing it. And normally I wouldn't put that many miles on a bike before giving you a final review, but there have been a couple little, temperamental things with this bike that I've been working out with Mokwheel. Don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely loving this bike. Just a couple of things I'm trying to figure out before I can give you an honest and full review. So anyways, those are my top 6 e-bikes. What do you think? Have you tried any of these bikes out? Do you have any questions about them? Do you disagree with my ranking? Have you had a different experience? I want to know what you think. So leave me a comment, share your experience. If you have a bike that you think can beat them all, then let me know. Other than that, stay tuned, and I'll catch you on the next one. Hey, Bear.